Hey guys, Mapletail here. Today I'm drawing my OC in the style of 8 video games that feature cats. It's been a very long time since I first attempted this, and I've played a bunch more cat-filled games since then. So before I get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos like this. My first style is from Spiritfarer. I haven't played it since it came out, but my younger sister played it not too long ago and reminded me that it has several cats in it. I wanted to start with a softball, and the Spiritfarer style is the closest to my own art style, especially out of the ones I selected today. The sketch was super straightforward, about how I draw normally with a few stylistic differences in the nose, mouth, and chest fur, as well as adding some flowers, as that's a super important part of Spiritfarer's character design. I chose Marigold as it's a flower I adore, and one I have tattooed. For the line art, I probably could have gotten away with using my usual inker, but it looks more like the cats were drawn with a chisel tip. Definitely an added challenge, as I find chisel brushes a bit too unpredictable for my taste. But it did give me the effect that I wanted. The coloring was easy peasy, as it's all just flats without any real shading, and my favorite part was those glowing white eyes. I love adding a glow effect, especially for some spooky spirit eyes. I thought about using a light blue, more similar to how Mapletail's eyes usually are, but I liked the white too much and wanted it to match the other spirits. While I may have started with a softball, the second style was a bit hellish to get through, and the definition of trust the process. And that's Stray. So basically just realism. Not my forte. But I love this game, and it's probably the most cat-forward of any video game. So there was no way I was skipping it. This drawing definitely took the longest, clocking in at well over an hour. I kept the sketching loose, but detailed enough so I'd have a solid base to work from, as this style doesn't call for line art. For the color, I started with flatting it in, but got distracted pretty quickly by the eyes. Eyes are something I know I can do alright realistically, so I find doing them early helps me to get into the piece without being too overwhelmed. I used a few different shades of teal blended together to get the look. For the pupil highlights, I referenced the Stray cat art very closely, as I really liked how they were done and it added a lot of depth. I moved on to other facial features, other bits that are easier for me to render, like the nose and mouth. Starting the fur is super intimidating for me, so I used the muzzle and around the eyes as starting points. Then onto some ears. Still not far out of my comfort zone. All my drawing in the new cattail style has really helped me out here, as that style is also decently realistic. I really liked how the Stray art made the ears seem to be thin and almost transparent with that red light behind them. So I tried to do the same sort of thing, but with Mapletail's teal color instead. I end up adding a fair bit of teal lighting throughout the piece, which I really liked the look of. On to the bulk of the fur. Drawing realistic cat fur is all about layers, and again, just trusting the process. I start off with some airbrush dark magenta over the face and body, around where the stripes would go, before adding the stripes themselves and blending it all out. Then some highlights around that dark, again, blend, blend, blend. It still wasn't giving me fur vibes. So I took that base color and put it on a multiply layer. Using a synthetic paintbrush, I started adding hairs one by one. Something I will usually never do, as it's a lot of work and it has to be done really carefully as to not to overdo it. To balance the dark hairs, I added a screen layer and painted fur onto the lighter parts of the piece as well. Not everywhere, but enough to give a nice effect. This is finally when I started to like how it was looking. I took a break from the fur to add some light and the harness. After that, I threw a bunch of whiskers on and got to shading, keeping the shadows similar to my reference image. I stopped filming after that, but to finish up, I added some effect layers over the whole drawing to color balance and bring the whole piece together. I was very happy to move on to a more simple style next, with Cult of the Lamb. This style is pretty easy to emulate. The hardest part was probably the sketch, just trying to get the shapes and proportions right. For the line art, I found a nice crunchy ink brush that looked very similar to what the original artist used. And after that, it was just a matter of going over my sketch and flatting in some colors. For the colors, I switched out the red shirt for a pale teal one, as that fits Mapletail's aesthetic better. I also did the facial markings in teal for the same reason. Next style is Slime Rancher. Time to transform Mapletail into an adorable tabby slime. All my reference images were pretty stylistically different, and I wasn't sure how to approach it. Figured I'd just work it out as I went. Easy sketch with some nice big shapes, and the only drawing to include Mapletail's cute stripy tail. For the coloring, I originally worked from the image at the top, light outline with a gradient at the center. But I wasn't a fan of how it was going, so I nixed it and started working from the image under it. Still official 2D art, but more of a cute lineless style. I moved the stripes to the top of the head like my OC has, and added her little freckles. I also ended up changing the closed eyes to a light teal, and that's about it. Another pretty simple one before moving back into a more complex style. The fifth style is Cattail's Wildwood Story. For this art style, I actually had some of my own art to work from, as I've tried to emulate this style a couple times before, with Mango of Cattail's 1, and one of my Cattail's characters, Maple. After drawing in the Stray style, this one actually felt a lot more illustrative than realistic, which along with my practice made it a lot easier to accomplish. The sketch felt very familiar to do, as I remembered sketching in this style before. For the line art, I used my sketch brush, sized down in a dark burgundy color, as the Cattail's line art isn't typically black. The line art was also really comfortable to do, as I use this brush often, and I know how to work with it. An important little bit of this style is the ear details, so I made sure to include some of that. For the eyes, I used a slightly darker lime color. And another thing that always makes me think of the Cattail's style is more boxy noses, which I think are super adorable. To finish off the lines, I add a couple of dashes to give the suggestion of fur. Then on to flatting in the colors. I did a drawing a bit ago with this color building brush that gives a pretty convincing Cattail's look. I was really excited about that. Versus the blended out sketch brush that I used for the other pieces currently on screen. I referenced Spark's thicker stripes, while still keeping it Mapletail-y. You can tell I was feeling pretty comfy with this piece, as I didn't go straight for rendering the eyes. Really happy with how the ears turned out with all those dark and light layers, as well as the highlights around the eyes. The only part that I really had trouble with was the under chin shading. But I figured it out in the end, or close enough. I also added some pale fur to her chest, just to give more of the color building layers in there. For the eyes, I didn't go as blendy as I usually might for this style, instead just blocking in the color gently. Finishing the piece with some whiskers and the muzzle lines, which I forgot. The next style was another nice and simple one, with Adorable Home. Made sure to get the tiny ears in the sketch and fluff up that face. The line brush is similar to Cult of the Lamb, but I didn't want to use the exact same one here. So I went for a pencil instead, which is slightly grainier. Not much to the coloring here, with no shading necessary, but I did make sure to add over markings. I've been looking at these squares in fear throughout this whole process. Next up is Potion Permit, which is pixel art. I have no idea how people usually do pixel art, but I'm sure as hell it is not whatever I do here. Once I got started, it actually wasn't as bad as I'm making it out to be. I sketched out a cat shape under the grid to start, and for the line art I just drew little black squares along my sketch lines. In hindsight, I probably could have just erased some of my grid and maybe used that as the lines. I don't know if that would have been faster or just more difficult. Anyways, once I finished with the lines, squares, cubed lines, I start coloring. Again, just drawing squares over my grid. I kept pretty close to my reference image of Kip's, as I'm very much not comfortable with this style or way of working. Just stray away in terms of the markings, adding some tabby stripes and cheek spots. Can't really do freckles at this scale. I think the shading really brought this one together, and I'm actually pretty happy with how it came out. The final style is ooblets. To call this one a cat is a touch of a stretch, but I've been playing ooblets pretty obsessively lately, ever since it came out on the Switch, and really wanted to include its art style here. Which, may I add, is really difficult to achieve with my skill set. Even the sketch was a bit of a struggle, as these are not cat shapes, and I draw cats. I nixed the paws entirely later on, as I was feeling pretty done after 4.5 hours straight of working on this art challenge. I tried to go for more of a cat-shaped mouth, but it looks kind of silly. Well, more silly. So I redrew it. I did add sharp kitty teeth, though. For the coloring, I knew I wanted to keep everything separate so I could alpha lock the layers and render each piece of the body separately. I used the circle tool for the eyes to get those really perfect circles, and did them up in Mapletail's teals. Like I said, I rendered all the pieces separately, and got a kind of gradient effect which I wanted. I think the shading near the end helped a lot to make it look a little bit more 3D, as well as the overlay effect that I add later in a purple gradient. I'm pretty happy with how this goofy little guy turned out, but definitely another trust the process drawing. Thanks for watching. This was a ton of fun to do. I've got a few more video game styles that I'd like to give a go in the future, so let me know if you want to see that. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next Thursday.